Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Very excited about this presentation. We have 3 librarians, 1 public, 2 school librarians here to talk to us today. And they're going to talk to us about going through the challenge process. So my name is Dr. Alicia Baker, and I am the chair for OKSL. And I will I'm going to quickly turn this over to them to give them plenty of time to talk to you about their process. Let me get this started for you. And give me a thumbs up if you can see that, the presentation. All right, thank you so much, Theri. I'm sorry. Okay, so just a quick disclaimer before we get started. The views, policies, and actions expressed during this presentation are those of the speakers and do not imply the expression or opinion of OLA or OKSL. The presentation is not intended to provide legal advice. So if you have any questions or need legal advice, we do suggest that you go to your administrator, your district, and seek advice through there. We do also have an advocacy group through OLA, and you can talk to them as well. So just for a brief introduction, they're going to talk a little bit more about what their roles in a library when they speak. But we do have 3 speakers here today. We have Theri Ray, who is a public librarian, Amanda Creese, who's a school librarian at Durant, and Dr. Heidi Jenkins, who's a school librarian at Bixby High School. And first up, we will hear from Theri Ray.
I'd love to go first. Hi, I'm Theri. I am the current library director at the Public Library of Enid and Garfield County. When I started my MLIS adventure, I planned to be a middle school librarian at a middle school here in Enid, but it didn't work out that way. So I ended up first as the teen librarian in Enid, and now I am the library director. So that's a little bit about me. I do have an education background. I started in a classroom and then migrated to the library. So yeah. And then I'm happy to talk about our process. The first thing that I want to say is we call them reconsideration requests, and that's not always bad. It's a vital part of your collection development and reviewing your collection to have community members, where for me it's community members, for you it would be students and or parents saying, hey, I have a question about this book. And that's not always a bad thing. We have had cases where we had something shelved wrong and somebody said, I think this book belongs somewhere else. And that's technically a reconsideration. And we had a great conversation and we moved the book and everybody's happy. So reconsiderations are not always bad. You do want to make sure that you have 2 very specific policies set up, and that is your collection development and your reconsideration of materials or your challenge process, so that you have on paper what that looks like. And one of the things that you will refer back to during a challenge is the collection development policy, and that is, what are we supposed to have in our collection? How do we decide to get a book? Who is this book for? In school libraries, a lot of times it's really specific. Like you have an elementary school library or a middle school library or a high school library, or in some schools that sort of spreads out. Like you can have a pre-K through 6th sort of environment, and that's a huge spread. And so you have to know which books are for whom, sort of thing. The other thing that I want to encourage folks is to figure out who your book allies are, and sort of know who those people are. And those can be other librarians, respected teachers, specifically like your ELA teachers, your English teachers, your reading teachers, community members who are advocates for access to information, your administration. So in a school, it will be like principals and the word just went out of my head, like the superintendent, assistant superintendents, your school board. In my case, it would also be my city commission, preferably my library board. And I did put on their legal counsel. I work a lot with my city's legal counsel, But having an idea about what is and is not legal is really, really important. So I have these sort of important concepts, which is the First Amendment gives access to freedom of speech, including the access to information, and the 14th Amendment, which talks about equal protection under the law, which means that we can't discriminate against people or ideas, which is a pretty significant library thought, right? Like, we don't discriminate against ideas. We have equal representation. And it's also not about liking the book. I've done a couple of these challenges, both in my library and with a school. And it's never about, did you like the book? At least not for me. There's plenty of books in my library that I don't like, and I would still defend them. So it's not about the book. It's about the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment and the collection development policy. So I'll tell you some of the ones that I have sat in on. In the fall of 2021, we had a concerned parent approach the school board at Enid Public Schools about the use of Dear Martin in the 11th grade curriculum. He was not happy with this book, and he didn't go through the formal process. He just came to the school board meeting, which I think we're finding a lot of people doing, where they're not having conversations with the libraries. They're complaining to the higher power. We did end up doing a formal review, and I was asked to sit on that review with 6 other community members. And it's a review where you read the whole book, because work has to be taken as a whole, not just little snippets that are problematic. And I sat on that committee with 6 other community members. They did end up removing that book from the curriculum. It's still in their library. It's just not used in the class anymore. And part of that may have been because it was added to the curriculum without going through its full process. Maybe, but I don't know all the ins and outs of that. That's what was officially said. And it is still available in their library. It's just not part of their curriculum, which is something that you face in schools that we don't face in the public library because we don't have a curriculum. Prior to June of 2022, as far as I know, there's never been a formal book challenge at the Enid Public Library. We have since had 4. We had 3 that were challenged all at the same time. All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. Honor Girl by Maggie Thrash. That one is a graphic novel. And The Life of Fred textbooks. Those are a homeschool curriculum for math. And somebody asked us to move it from the adult section where we had it to the youth section. So we went through all of those processes. We did not move The Life of Fred textbooks because, in our opinion, the people looking for curriculum are adults, not children. Parents are looking for the curriculum for their children. And in the adult section, they were all together. So all the math textbooks are together. If we were to separate them out in the children's section, you would have some in the children's section and some in the YA section, and that would make it harder for parents to find them. So that's one of the things that we consider when we consider moving things, is what makes it easiest for our patrons to find them. Honor Girl by Maggie Thrash. The request was that we remove it from the collection entirely. We've gotten much more sort of requests to move or remove graphic novels under the idea that because they are comic books, they are pictures, they appeal to little children. That's not entirely accurate. Yes, kids like pictures. Plenty of grown-ups like graphic novels. There are plenty of adult graphic novels that are not for children. We do have an entire adult graphic novel collection in our adult area away from kids. We did not move that one. We did find that it is appropriate for middle school or high schoolers. It is about a young lady who goes to camp and ends up having a crush on one of the camp counselors. And it is a same-sex crush. Nothing happens. There's a couple of dream sequences where she kind of wishes that there was some kissing going on, but it's there's nothing inappropriate for children in that book. All Boys Aren't Blue, they asked us to move it to the adult section. We did end up moving it to the adult section. And that's one that, while it is written for teens, there are some scenes that are more difficult to deal with. And it's, in my opinion, it was better to move it to the adult section than to not have it. And so in a public library, that's an option that we have. I have heard of school libraries moving things from their middle school collection to their high school collection as well, just to make sure that there's representation in the book, but that it is set in such a place that the more appropriate audience can find it. And All Boys Aren't Blue, while it's appropriate for teens, it's appropriate for older teens. And so if you're 17, jumping up into the adult section is not a stretch. You're probably already looking there. So that's one that we did move. The current one that we're looking at is Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver. That one was challenged here in our library in September. We did our full review. That review consists of myself and 3 to 4 other librarians completely reading the book, and then we have a conversation. That one is my decision is being appealed. So that one will go before our library board in March. And we'll see how that goes. Our city attorney is planning quite the defense of the book, because if we're going to remove a book, we have to have legal grounds to do that. I don't think this one meets the criteria, but those are some of the challenges that I've done here recently. And the only challenges that I've really been a part of, because before 2022, there were no official challenges at our library. Just have some, I think there's another slide, right? There we go. Okay, so when theory becomes practice, I always think it is best to start a conversation with people using all of your great librarian skills, like your curiosity and asking, what is it exactly that you're concerned about? You know, what would you like for us to do with it? And then be able to explain a bit about what the book represents, what the freedom of access means, and how library collections are not for a single person, they're for the entire community. And we want to make sure that we have access for everybody. If you can't have that conversation, or people are not persuaded, then we have people fill out a formal challenge form. We call it the request for reconsideration. And they can request reconsideration for anything in our library that includes displays and programs, of course, books. We do have DVDs. So if they do that, then we have a full review by a committee of librarians. And depending on the length of the book, this can take a lot of time, especially if you have to get multiple copies of the book and you don't have that many copies. We get ours done within 30 days of when it was submitted. And if you've had that conversation and you know that it didn't go well, then you can start reading ahead of time. We have never missed the deadline yet on that 30 days, but it does take a lot of emotional energy. And that's one thing that I want to work on with my folks, is to not be quite so emotionally invested. I think we do get invested because we're such staunch defenders of the books, but it's not about the specific book. It's about freedom and access to information. And then we have a big discussion. I submit something in writing. Hopefully it stops there. If not, it gets appealed to our board. In schools, I believe it probably goes to administration and then school boards. One thing that we do is we have lots of conversation with our administrative folks before we get to the point where I'm writing the decision. So before I write the decision, my city manager and my city attorney already know what I'm going to say. And we've already had the conversations and we're all on the same page about it. And I think that that's really, really helpful. Then I tagged 2 laws. This is not legal advice. This is just information about Title 21. And these are the definitions of harmful to minors and obscenity. And I have to look at both, because if something is harmful to minors, it can't be in the youth section. And that's really close to the obscenity criteria, but we don't have any obscenity in our library at all. So there's a difference of level between obscenity for the adult section and harmful to minors for the youth section. So there's a lot to consider. I think I did it in less than 15 minutes.
Hello, I'm Amanda Cressy, and I am a high school librarian. I'm way down here in Durant, where we have all the sleet and the icy roads, and we've been out of school all week. So my webcam is at school. So I'm sorry you're having to look at my picture. But I also teach English, creative writing, and young adult literature at our local college during the summer. I have education degrees in English, literature, and library media. And I started my librarian career over 25 years ago. I have 4 kids of my own. They're all in between 20 and 24, but I know what she is talking about, the emotional energy that goes when you have a book that's been challenged, because that's what we do. We put our heart and our soul into our libraries, and we do take it personally, even though we shouldn't. That's easier said than done. So I want to talk about my experience. In March of 2014, my library assistant took a phone call while I was in a classroom teaching, and the phone call was from a lady in our community asking if we had Toni Morrison's award-winning book, The Bluest Eye, in our collection. Well, my 65-year-old assistant said she wasn't sure, but could look in our catalog and check. And while my assistant was looking, the community member started reading aloud the scene where a father is raping a child. My assistant, she said that she doubted we'd have anything like that, but then the page loaded and it showed it was indeed a part of our collection. My assistant told the lady that she was sure I didn't know it was in our collection, and that we're thankful she brought it to our attention. I returned from teaching and was given the message. I had to explain to my assistant that there's a process before we remove a book. And I tried to find the concerned parents' information in our school database so I could see who her student was and if they had been assigned the book or if they had even checked it out. And I discovered the lady had no children in our district. So I was a little baffled. I called the lady because she wanted me to call her back. So I called her back and explained the procedure to challenge or have a book reconsidered. I informed my building principal of the conversation and left the documents in the office for her to pick up. And while I'm talking about my happenings with this, I did make some mistakes, and I want you to be aware of that so that you can learn from my mistakes. I was in the middle of teaching research, and I did not make the time to meet her with the documents, have that conversation with her. And since then, I have done that, and I have caused a lot of things to stop at that place where you can explain why a book is in your collection. But going forward, when she did arrive, she asked to speak with our principal, and she read aloud again the pages of the book she was concerned about. My principal agreed that the book was graphic and told her that she just had these papers for her to fill out, but she could approach the superintendent with her concern. My superintendent, of course, called me after the lady emailed him with all the pages of all the graphic details. And he said, we need to pull that book. And I said, we can't. That's not the policy. He was furious. This was his first year as a superintendent, and he didn't realize we had a policy in place. And he did not want to follow policy, but I stood firm on that. We have to follow the policy. We have to on every other dealings with the school. And this is school board approved policy. And I started calling all of my book allies, my advocates. I called retired teachers. I called my past students. I called, of course, the OLA and ALA, and I started getting all the people who would advocate for me and for this book. And, I started getting people on our side. And the paperwork was filed. My superintendent allowed her to address the Board of Education at their next meeting. Again, what do you think she did? She read all those pages out loud to our school board. And after the official paperwork was filed, we formed our evaluation committee, which was the next step. And thankfully, I was able to hand select our evaluation committee. It had to include a counselor, a classroom teacher, a parent, the principal, and myself. And like I said, I'd already started contacting people who would support me. I also contacted local bookstore owners, our local college. I contacted people there. Again, I wanted people to also know that there was a reason this book was in our library, but we ended up making national news. This was again 2014. It was not happening everywhere as it is now, it seems like. So when our committee met, I came in with a 3-inch binder full of research, reviews, and supporting resources. We reported back to the board that the book would remain in our collection. But there were losses in this fight. The deepest one was my superintendent's support. This embarrassed him. And when I said no, when he told me to remove it, that created a wedge, and it has hurt me professionally, even though we followed policy and we did what we needed to do. So just realize that even when you go through all the steps and the book remains, you still are going to have some people who are upset with you. I know I get told no more than any of our other librarians in our district. And every time our committee turns in a book order list, there's several things that get marked out on that list. And again, it's just because there's a rift in that relationship. But what I want you to know is what you can do now, and things that I want you to learn from me and some of my mistakes that I had on this path. So educate, that's the first thing. Educate your superintendent. If my superintendent, when he was hired, if I would have set up a meeting with him and made sure he knew what our policies and our procedures were, then it may not have come as such a shock to him. So educate your administration, your principals, even the board members about the selection policy and all of its elements, your policy on controversial materials, evaluation and review of existing materials. And, like what was already said, that is not always a bad thing to reevaluate, especially if you're coming into a new library where you didn't order everything that's in there. Also, let people know, educate them on the procedures for dealing with challenges. Let them know the supporting documents, the Bill of Rights, the ethics, the freedom to read. Your school mission statement, a lot of times, will support the books that you have in your library. Of course, we also work with the AP list, the National Council of Teachers of Education. So also now is the time to invite your local legislators to come to your library to see the amazing things that you're doing with your students. And if you develop that relationship now, then when something happens, you don't have to advocate quite as hard, because they know that you know what you're doing and that you're doing good things, that you're not just trying to pollute your students' minds. And so that's the second thing, is advocating. Advocate your role. Let them know you are an expert. My school, they know I read. I read, I talk about books that I read. I toot my own horn. I put my circulation numbers out there. Anytime we have events and success stories, it's in the newsletters. And that's important, that everyone knows what's going on in your library. Now, I have stopped with all of my online posting. Everything basically stays in-house. I don't want any attention to specific books, and that has just kind of been a thing that has helped us not draw attention to things. So I just keep everything in-house when I'm talking about books. But when I do book talks, I also talk about how books are windows and mirrors. And so our students, they know that our library has books that may not be for everyone, but everyone should see themselves in a book. Everyone should have a book in the library they can go and read about themselves. And so I make that a constant conversation that we're having. Research is the next thing. So just like when I came into that meeting with my 3-ring binder, you have to know your collection. You have to know your community. Find the literary merit. Sometimes there's books and I'll read them and I'm like, this is great, but if this page right here was read aloud for a group of parents, I don't think I would fight for this book. So, you do have to see what's out there in your collection and know how your community will accept that or not. So then once you make your decisions for your own community, sometimes you have to compromise a little bit so that you can, again, hold your ground on things, and then enforce things. Have confidence in the process. You are the professional, so don't be intimidated, and enforce the policy, implement the procedures. We all have personal biases. And so if you have a policy where you're supposed to have a committee for coming up with what is chosen and selected for your library, follow that. Because up until this time, I thought it was great that no one asked me what I was selecting, and I didn't have to really talk to anyone. I just made my list and it was purchased. But it's been better if you have your selection committee and you meet and you say, here's what we're going to be ordering. Let's go by line, and let's talk about these things. So nothing comes as a surprise. So make sure you're implementing the procedures ahead of time before you have to. And then relay the message, of course, that one parent cannot determine the reading materials for all. And, just communicate about censorship and that knowledge and reading, that's where we eliminate fear. So this is just kind of what I learned by going through the process. These are some things that I've taken on since then. And thankfully, we haven't had anything since 2014. But again, if you can take anything that I did and learn from it and grow so you don't have to go through this, then please learn from my mistakes.
Okay, I guess I'm up next. I'm Heidi Jenkins. I work at Bixby High School. Been there for about 18 years. I was a science teacher for 10 years before that. So been in education for a long time. I now teach adjunct at NSU also. So I'm kind of on both sides of the young adult spectrum of literature. And we have had an ongoing situation in our district since the fall of 2021. I'm going to just talk about kind of what my experience was, as the other two have, and try to kind of help you know some things that maybe will save you some stress. But also kind of let you know how it really can unfold. So if you'll go ahead and advance the slide for me, Dr. Baker, thank you. So in fall of 2021, we got 2 challenges at the same time by the parents. I did not speak to the parent. I'm really glad I didn't speak to the parent because I have multiple roles at the high school. And I dealt personally with her child in a different role. And I just felt great that I had never met her, so she didn't have any sort of really feeling about me personally, other than my selection. And I was able to work with her child, of course, professionally, but I didn't want her to feel that anything would be uncomfortable for him. And so I was really kind of glad I never met her in this capacity. I saw her at the board meeting, But other than that, I never really met her. But she challenged 13 Reasons Why and Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. I had 13 Reasons Why, and so did the 9th grade center. But I was the only one who had Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. And my principal was the one who met with the parent and gave her the paperwork. And they kind of had to hunt for the paperwork because we'd never, I mean, there were no challenges on record at that time that anyone had ever experienced. So it was all kind of new for us. After that meeting, this particular parent who associated herself in the meeting with a well-known national group of moms, she went on social media and said negative things about her meeting with the principal and about my principal in general. So things got kind of uncomfortable very quickly. But we went ahead and had our first committee meeting, as the policy stated. And we agreed in the committee, which my principal was tasked to form the committee. And so it was myself and him and 2 parents and 2 English teachers. And we voted to retain both books. I brought to the meeting, as Amanda was saying, a binder full of information, professional reviews, personal views of the books. The issue with 13 Reasons Why was that it appeared from the written challenge documents that the parent was mixing the Netflix series with the book. We're unsure if she ever actually read the book. Her documentation for Me and Earl and the Dying Girl directly indicated she never finished the book because the ending does not match what her challenge was. So trying to argue literary merit was difficult. And quite frankly, she said from the beginning, the first meeting with my principal, that she was going all the way to the board and she wanted these books gone. There were multiple meetings with myself, with my principal, with downtown district administration. There was the second committee, which is done at it was done at an assistant superintendent level, again, voted to retain. And then we had in spring of 2022, we had the board meeting. 13 Reasons Why was voted unanimously to keep. Me and Earl and the Dying Girl was, I believe, 3-2, so it was retained. Relationships, as Amanda was saying, were damaged during this time. The policy was not necessarily closely followed by all parties. And there was a sense that some people would be making the decisions despite others' professional opinions. So, as Amanda said, you want to be as careful as you can be to both maintain your professional ethics and not take things personally and remain professional, but also understand that it can get a little uncomfortable at times. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so during this whole time that we were going to be going to the board to decide on the 2 books that had already been challenged, the BPS district administration decided to create a procedure to allow parents to put pre-selected titles on hold for their students. So basically, as a parent, I can go in, look in the catalog. Well, first I fill out a form to say, I do not want my child to have open access to the library. Originally, they called this procedure limited library access. And we encouraged them, we as the librarians encouraged them to not call it that. We didn't like the connotation of limited library access, but the effect is still the same. And I did link it in the slides. Basically, you set up a parent account. Well, the librarian sets up a parent account for you. And the parent is able to go in and say, Sally can check out these 5 titles. And so they're put on hold for Sally. So Sally is not supposed to check out anything but those titles that mom or dad or guardian has pre-selected. That did not solve anything. It's been a year now, and we've only had one parent follow through with that entire procedure, and that had more to do with if she checks out library books, then she won't do her homework, and not any fear of what she might be checking out from the library. The day after that procedure was announced, for the next 2 days, we got 2 more challenges, the Lovely Bones and Out of Darkness. The Lovely Bones didn't go anywhere. It occurred, both of these challenges occurred, and we started with Out of Darkness first, and we held the first committee meeting, and then the second committee worked over the summer and met and voted to retain. But during this time, my principal left, and so he didn't work on the Lovely Bones before he left, and my new principal picked it up in the fall, and the parents said they didn't want to follow through. So Out of Darkness went through 2 committees and was retained, and the parent did not want to take it to the board. However, this parent group continues to bring forth titles at board meetings, as Amanda is saying, and they read pages, or they have moved on to graphic novels, or they bring images from graphic novels. The reason I'm saying it's the same parent group is they identify themselves as a particular parent group. They say, I represent this parent group. And that has kind of helped us in our ability to prepare, because when we do our research to see what titles, we already kind of have started gathering our research and our arguments regarding these titles. They came after The Bluest Eye. I was actually at the board meeting when that one was mentioned, and argued that I was addressed at the board meeting by either the superintendent or a board member. I was in the audience, I wasn't there to speak, and I made the argument that our community standards, which is something that we keep discussing in our district, is, do these books meet our community standards? And my argument was that The Bluest Eye is on recommended college reading lists and AP literature lists, and we have a community standard of preparing our students for college. So since The Bluest Eye was mentioned, this group has moved on to graphic novels. And they actually, I haven't found on the actual website where it states an affiliation with this group. But the way I found the website was through some sort of rabbit hole search about the parent group. But the website is called Book Looks. And you can go on this Book Looks and find where they have done an analysis of the book, which is basically pulling pages and quotes from the book. And in graphic novels, they describe an image or they photocopied an image, okay? So some of it is taken so far out of context, it's easy to see how you can sort of already kind of know how you're going to argue the literary merit of something. But this is what the group is kind of taking to board meetings. So they're not necessarily reading the entire works. They're just kind of showing up at board meetings, because I think this is Oklahoma state law, correct me if I'm wrong, but in our district, a person is entitled to speak for 3 minutes to the board if they have registered to do so prior to the meeting. And they're not allowed to use profanity. And they lean on that quite a bit when they say, I can't even read this to you because it has so much profanity in it. So that's where we're at right now as far as our book challenges. We don't have a formal challenge in play right now. We have titles coming forth at board meetings, and then there's a mad scramble to find out, you know, can we back this title or not, etc. So that leads us to the next slide. So we talk all the time about policies. And the policy that we had in place when this first started in the fall of 2021 was a policy that myself and other librarians in the district had worked on, word for word, over a school year on lunch breaks. Once a month we met, we went through the entire policy word for word. That was the last experience I had had with writing a policy for a district. Since the fall of 2021, our policy has changed 3 times. In the summer of 2022, there was state legislation that caused the first change in policy. The way that the librarians in the district found out there was going to be a change in the policy was that we read the board agenda and noted that there was a line item that said policy change for our policy number. And, you know, we immediately said, what's the change going to be? And that was what we were told. And unfortunately, since I've also been snowed in, I don't have the exact wording for you right now, but we were told this line had to be added and it has to do with community standards. In September of 2022, 2 librarians and 2 district administrators met, and the district had decided they were going to create an internal library review committee for within the district. So if a parent does not like a book, they can still challenge the book in the traditional sense of the policy that we previously had and have used. If a site principal, a library media specialist, or the district head of curriculum and innovation, not really sure what the qualification is there, think that a book needs to be reconsidered, then that book can be reconsidered. So what this has now turned into is the parent goes to the board meeting and says, I don't like this book. we get a phone call or an email, this book came up at the board meeting. It goes to under review. We start looking at it. And recently, after I gave my professional opinion, the book was taken out of the library through this internal library review committee against my professional opinion. So that's where we're at. Then I believe it was December, a parent brought forth a graphic novel. Secondary teachers were told they needed to review all of their graphic novels. And in January, they added a line to the policy that said all graphic novels have to be viewed page by page before being put on the shelf. So, it is an ever-evolving situation where I am. We have not had that much input. The September Internal Library Review Committee, yes, I was there and another librarian was there, but it was not to make the decision. It was to formulate the language. Yeah. So if I didn't have my fellow librarians, it would be a very, very difficult time right now. I am, as the high school librarian, I have been bombarded. No, I am on the review committee. Okay, so for that particular title, I had already given my professional opinion. Okay. And since there are 3 people who can call the committee, myself, the director of curriculum and innovation, or the site principal, I said, I have already given my professional opinion. If you feel you need to internally review the title, that is up to you. And that's what they did. So I maintained my professional ethic of saying, I think that we can retain this book. We can move it into the professional collection so that it is available to teachers to use. And they went around me, which was following policy because this policy was created. And I think, as Amanda experienced, I think that will probably cause me problems later, because I basically just refused to do what they wanted me to do, which was they wanted me to take it off the shelf. And I said, I've already given my opinion. So this all sounds way scarier. I was going to try to be more positive, but I think that you should know that you know your stuff. You are the expert. But when it comes to the actual experience of it, this is your job. These people pay you. These people are people you're going to want to continue to work with. I mean, Amanda said her situation happened in 2014. Theri said she continues to work with her city manager, her legal manager. Like, these are ongoing relationships with people. When we recently had another issue come up at one of the younger grades, I told my colleague, I said, maintain your professional ethic. Don't get, personal, emotional. Just say, I disagree, and let them make the next move. And we feel like they've now built a system that provides them the ability to just run right around us. And it's board approved. So I'm not really sure what there is to do about it. And everything they've done, they say to us, the lawyer says, and we don't actually talk to the lawyers. So we are just trying to do what we've been taught to do and what we believe in, and continue to provide the best materials we can. What has really bothered me about the whole thing is that almost every title they've come after has been the assault of a female person. The Lovely Bones, 13 Reasons Why, Out of Darkness. And it's as though they want to hide the fact that assault occurs, or they want girls to think that if they're assaulted and want to tell their story, that's pornography. And that really, really bothers me. But they did vote to retain the 2 books, and everything else has not gone to the board. So that's been my experience, and it is ongoing. And I have a giant pile of graphic novels to get through when the snow melts. So
Thank you very much. All 3 of you, wonderful discussion. Thank you. We do have some time for some questions. So if anyone has questions for any of the 3 presenters, I did see something in the chat. Did you answer that, Heidi?
yes.
Okay, that's what I thought you were answering. So I just wanted to make sure. So
I have served on, well, I'm serving on a committee. We're looking at the hate you give at the middle school level. But as Theri pointed out, sometimes this takes a long time, and the process is just not moving. I've already given my opinion, but they just keep asking other people for their opinion. So I'm not really, now they've said they're going to create a subcommittee. So I'm not really.
it feels like if there's a process in place, there should be like a first step, second step, third step, and then, like this is the end, you have our decision. Like Theri, I think she had like a step-by-step.
Yes.
I write this
Yes.
decision out, and if there's an appeal, there's appeal, but there's a process for that. So it feels like yours is a little more
I think since they built, I think since they built the internal review committee, it has opened it up to their interpretation a lot more. And I mean, our group in our district, we had 3 parents show up to the board meeting to support. They wore I Read Banned Books t-shirts, etc., to support the libraries and the retention of the books when we had the board meeting. Their social media was trolled. Images were taken and put on this group's social media, and they were blasted as being terrible people. So it's an extremely active group, and they seem to have a lot of time to do this. I can't imagine what's out there about me. I just don't really, I kind of ignore social media for the most part. But I'm like Amanda, I put almost nothing out there anymore too, because you just never know who's looking.
So we do
at
have a
what.
question from the chat. So,
Oh, so
you
sorry.
guys, anyone that wants to chime in here, they said, is it legal, ethical to tell parents what their middle school, high school children have been checking out? If not, how can parents choose a list their children must read from?
Well, when I researched it, it's not illegal. I don't feel it's ethical, because we have students who are exploring aspects of their personality and their biology and their life choices that perhaps parents aren't agreeing with. And that's, I mean, I would consider that private, but at this point, I've not had anyone take advantage of that. So I haven't faced that myself. But again, that policy was created by the district administration.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's one of those fine balances things, because in a library, your information searches are protected. Your information searches are protected by state statute. However, most people are going to say, but that doesn't apply for parents of children. So what we do in our library is, hey, if you're responsible for the library card, you can log in to your history and view everything that was checked out on your library card. And if you signed your children up for a library card, you can do that. Now, you can't call us and ask us what you've checked out, because we wouldn't give anybody's information over the phone. Like, so if somebody called and said, hey, you know, like, I'm Susie, I'm 47, and I want to know, you know, like, what's the last 5 books I checked out? We're going to say, I'm sorry, we can't give you that information over the phone. Here's how you can check it out. And we would do the same thing for people asking about what their children checked out, if they're the custodial parent on the card. So a non-custodial parent can't get that information unless the child is going to show them what they've checked out, in which case we will always say, you should talk with children and parents about that, and not leave the library to parent your children. Please parent your children. But yeah, for us, it's who is the responsible party on the library card. That person can look at the history. Yeah, but so I think it is definitely a ethical issue for librarians to hand out somebody else's information searches, regardless of what they are. Does that help muddy the waters a little bit and make it just a little more confusing?
And I think that question goes back to what Heidi was talking about the way that the parents can, you know, look at or select 5 books that their child can. And there have been several districts in Oklahoma that I've heard have some kind of version of that, where they can kind of monitor and look at what their children are checking out, or, you know, do that. And I think there are some different ways that can still protect their child's privacy a little bit more, and they just put more of a limit on what they can't check out versus seeing what they have checked out. Like, they might put a mature tag on some of the books that they have, and their child's just not able to check out those mature books. So that way, I think you can still protect the child's privacy, but still make sure that they're not checking out those books the parents don't want them to, if that makes sense.
We ran into some different, just like back end technology issues with setting some of that up too. And that was tricky, because, you know, if you have your patrons updating nightly from your Power School enrollment system, is it carrying over this limited library access? So yeah, there's just a lot. And then in our policy now, it says that we might have books labeled mature. So I think it was The Lovely Bones, when the parent dropped The Lovely Bones, I was asked about it, and I said I put a mature sticker on it and moved on. And then I was questioned, well, so what does mature mean? Do you limit that to 18 plus? And I said, no, you didn't say I had to do that. Like, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Any other questions that we have? I am real quick. I had a question. Theri brought up the being involved in the ELA curriculum challenge. So I thought that was interesting, with the librarians also being pulled into classroom collection issues. So Amanda, in Durant, do you deal with classroom collections as well, or Heidi?
Yes, I do. everything that is taught in the classroom goes through a selection committee as well. And I'm a part of that committee.
So, and they would follow the same reconsideration procedure if that came about, similar to what Theri talked about.
We haven't had that, but yes, they would. That's what we have stated.
Okay. Same with you, Heidi?
Actually, I think that, so teaching items is one thing, and that is under our curriculum, different curriculum directors. But actually, I think that classroom libraries is what is slowing down the hate you give at the middle school. I think that left to the principal, that book would be moved out, but so many teachers at the 8th grade level have it in their classroom libraries. I think there's some hesitation. This one's not going to fly under the radar. They're going to have to be really vocal and tell people you have to remove that from your classroom libraries. And so not so much the curriculum, a number of teachers, as soon as we started having things come up in the fall of 2021, I mean, that started affecting curriculum immediately. It was like, oh, I don't want to teach that. Oh, I don't want to teach that. And I mean, there are a lot of choices out there to teach. But it will be very interesting to see what happens with the hate you give and what happens with classroom libraries. There are teachers at the high school where I work who have just covered their classroom libraries this year.
Mm-hmm.
They're just afraid.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what.
Good. I was going to say, at a previous one of these webinars, one of the speakers, she said that her job now is also taking care of the classroom libraries. That's considered part of the library collection. So she has to work, with her selection policy. She has to go through all their libraries and make sure that they meet their criteria from the selection policy, the reconsideration policy, all of that now. So that's under her job description as well. So it's just kind of interesting to see what the differences in all the different districts. So
yes.
Any other questions? It's a couple minutes past, so I don't want to keep you all longer than.
Well, I would just want to say one thing. Just do not avoid controversial materials in anticipation of complaints.
That's right.
Our kids need those books, and talking about, tragedies is good. Entering into those conversations, not talking about it is a more serious thing. So select materials of high literary value and follow your selection policy. But, don't be so afraid of having complaints that you limit what our kids have access to.
Agreed.
Thank you very much for that, Amanda.
Absolutely. I would also say reach out to other librarians when you have questions. We love to help people. So, reach out. If I can be helpful in any way, send me an email and I will promise to do my best to answer within 24 hours. But this kind of collaboration is so important, and always your professional networks, other librarians, definitely be connecting because it is so helpful.
Also, OLA, AASL, and ALA. We have supports there for you, so please do reach out if you have any questions or need support there. So again, thank you so much, Theri, Heidi, and Amanda. I appreciate you taking the time. I did want to just kind of a plug. We do have 3 more of these webinars, and the whole umbrella is collection development. So our next one is February 15th. I'm going to just kind of slide this right over here. Kind of show you guys. We have selection tools on a tight budget, because part of your policies should include your selection policy. So you always need to be using selection tools. So we'll have Latasha McKinney speaking on that. Then we are going to be talking about weeding. So we'll have Dr. Stacy Schrank and Dr. Shelley Sharber speaking March 29th. And then this is something that I believe, was it Amanda brought up about working, or was it Amanda or Terry? I don't remember which one. I'm so sorry. I want to give you guys credit for bringing this idea up, but working with your school administrators, talking with them beforehand, letting them know the, the policies that you have in place. So when they do have it was Amanda, they do have, a parent that comes to them, they're not, surprised that you actually have a policy in place, that there's, a procedure that you go to. So how do you work with your school administrator to help them be prepared before something like this happens? So you can try to get through something like this and still have some semblance of a good working relationship. So that's going to be April 5th, and we'll have Lauren Sanders speaking then. So I hope that you guys will join us for one or all of those. Be looking for more information to come on Facebook page, or I'll be sending it through the OKSL newsletters. So I appreciate everyone joining us tonight. I will be sending out the recording of this, and you will be getting also a CEU. So you can use this as professional development. In the meantime, if you have any questions or need anything, any follow-up, anything, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll answer any questions that you have. Let's see, there's one more thing in the chat, and make sure I don't miss anything before you all go. So more thank yous for everyone sharing your time, knowledge, and allowing us to learn from your mistakes. So thank you.